Hi guys, I'm going to do today's Q&A. We're going to start with a bunch of pre-submitted questions that I got. There's actually quite a few, and then I'm going to try to answer as many as possible of the ones you submitted in the question box today. So the first question is, wondering your thoughts on piercings, body or non-earlobe. Do you think they can trigger an autoimmune response? I've had my belly button pierced twice and my body rejected it both times, pushed it out and formed scar tissue. So, not necessarily an autoimmune response, but your body, when you do get a piercing, it's a foreign object, so your body's going to attack it. It's going to create inflammation, and so the scar tissue in your body pushing it out of itself is your body trying to protect itself, your immune system trying to protect your body. So whether or not it causes an autoimmune disease is, dependent on the person and their health. It depends on the kind of metal being used, the kind of stress you're under, and the status of your immune system. That's kind of what I would think would cause an autoimmune response, but it doesn't necessarily cause an autoimmune response, but it definitely, absolutely causes an immune response. What do you think about preeclampsia increasing in pregnant women? So I haven't seen any stats on today's numbers, but I do know that they increased at least 1% from the 80s to the 2000s. So it is increasing, and the cause of it, my guess is just stress and undernourishment. We have more and more stress. Women are undernourishing themselves. They're not meeting the needs that they need to meet their stress. They're not nourishing themselves to meet their stress. And so what we're seeing is a lot of infertility issues, a lot of pregnancy complications, and those just keep rising. And so preeclampsia is pretty much, it's not immune to this. It's kind of a symptom of a bigger issue, which is we're not going into pregnancy healthy. We're having, lots of issues. We're not nourishing our bodies throughout leading up to preconception. We're entering pregnancy malnourished and with issues. And so this can cause a lot of issues while you're pregnant. I'm actually working on something really cool with the preconception PT, my really good friend. And hopefully we're going to be able to kind of break down the barriers of these issues, clear up some misconceptions and help women get their bodies ready for baby. So more to come. And if you're interested, you can sign up in the link in my bio. I have a wait list for more information, so you'll be the first to know what we're talking about. Thoughts on breastfeeding a 2-year-old while pregnant? We are wanting to get pregnant again, but I'm wondering about the nutrition side of it. So I'm glad you asked. Breastfeeding is a really depleting thing. It's a really depleting phase of the body, but also it proceeds. So what precedes breastfeeding is also pregnancy, which is also very depleting. And so there's a reason that our ancestors took at least a couple years in between each child and made sure they were focusing on healing and replenishing and doing all that stuff before they even thought of having a child again. Honestly, I think they also took like years of abstinence because they knew that it would be dangerous for the next child to actually try to conceive. It would also be dangerous for the mother. So going from breastfeeding and trying to be pregnant at the same time, that's double depleting. We likely haven't recovered from our first pregnancy. We need time to replete and take some time for ourselves. So that's my thoughts. That's what I'm personally going to be doing. I'm going to be taking a couple years in between children. But, that doesn't mean you need to be abstinent necessarily. That's not what I'm trying to say. That's not the point of this. But just understand that, you're already depleted and it's not going to bode well for you or your next child. So that's some food for thought. And one last note on that. If you are breastfeeding and pregnant at the same time, the child that you're breastfeeding will also be compromised as well. So you're compromising the health of all three of you instead of just one of you. I haven't gotten my period since June and strands of my hair are falling out, but recently I lost weight because I've been exercising. Is that a sign of imbalanced hormones? If so, what do I do to go back to normal? So those are two very big signs that your body's under excessive stress. We should be very worried when we lose our period. That is the number one thing that we need to use as our health report card. Our period is a report card for our health, and it tells us every month how we're doing. So if we lost it, our body is pretty much in the ultimate survival mode. It doesn't feel safe enough to reproduce, and that means there's other things going on that it's compensating for. Your hair is another example of this. Your hair needs nourishment to be maintained. If your body doesn't feel safe enough or like it has enough energy to expend on hair, it's not going to. Hair is dispensable. So these are two very clear signs that yes, there definitely is a hormonal imbalance, and if this is not addressed, it could turn into worse things. So that said, how to go back to normal, I don't know what your normal is, but if you want to get your period back and your hair back, you really need to take a good look at what you've changed over the past couple months and assess that way. Have you been nourishing yourself to meet your body's new demands of exercise? What kind of exercise are you doing? Is it a different kind? Have you just started exercising in general? Have you gone too hard, too fast? How are you living your life the rest of the time? Are you able to rest and recuperate, or are you just constantly draining yourself of energy, draining your health bank account, and not depositing anything back in, as my mentor would say? So we really need to take a good look at all of these things, because it's not just one thing that's going to help you get back to your normal. It's cumulative. So this has probably been going on for some time. Maybe you weren't even in a good state a couple months ago. So just some food for thought. If you can't have every food group each day, can't spend a lot on groceries, would a lower dose prenatal without iron be a good insurance for a pregnant mom? In my opinion, prenatals are kind of like a waste of money, and they're harmful to health. So I'm always going to spend more money or redirect the money I would have spent on like a $30, $40 prenatal on foods that I could be getting. What does a $40 prenatal get you? It gets you a couple cans of oysters each week. That's huge. That's way better than synthetic supplements that are going to imbalance everything else. What does 20 minutes of sun for 15 a day get you? That gets you all the vitamin D that you need. What does $4 bottles of milk get you each week? That's like $16 every month. Right there you have a couple of things that are, in my opinion, way better for you than synthetic prenatals with iron and imbalanced ratios and things we shouldn't be supplementing. So these are considerations that I would take into account, but again, you have to decide what's right for you and your budget and your current situation. So this is how I look at things. I would probably find other ways to get better food sources. Maybe give up Starbucks every morning, or maybe not go out to eat as much, and refocus those finances and funnel them into higher quality foods that I can be getting to support my child, who I'm also going to have to finance their food. This is a really good question. What is necessary to make sure copper gets incorporated into ceruloplasmin? So we have a fellow nerd here. I love it. It's dependent on retinol stimulating copper loading. So copper loading into ceruloplasmin cannot happen without real vitamin A, which is, I have a post on this, it's not beta carotene, it doesn't come from plants, it comes from animal fats. So there you go. I don't take turmeric supplements, but I use organic turmeric powder when making my broth. What are your thoughts on this? I think that's fine. I just wouldn't house turmeric because it is estrogenic. But here and there can work really well for some people. So go for it. Are sweet potatoes and Japanese potatoes okay for candida? This is really dependent on the person and how bad their candida is. But generally speaking, starches are going to feed candida a little bit more than, carbs or sugars from fruit would. So that's something to take into consideration. But again, I don't know your situation. But perhaps I should have mentioned this, because sometimes I forget people don't know this, but you can't cut carbs if you want to get rid of candida. It'll make candida come back 10 times worse. So you have to continue eating carbs. You just have to find the right carb balance and ratio and the ones that work for you. And generally those are going to be low fiber. Do you have any idea why I sometimes feel jittery over easy eggs, but scrambled eggs do not make me feel this way? My question to you would be, have you tried just eating the yolks? Because maybe, this is just speculation, but maybe you have some kind of sensitivity to the egg whites. There's, some people do, and perhaps because you're eating things separate with the over easy eggs and not combined, which might somehow like minimize the reaction you're having to the egg whites. That could be it, but honestly, that's my only guess because you don't have a reaction to scrambled eggs in general. So That's what I'm. How do you feel about spirulina for copper? I'm not really a fan. There's way better sources of copper, bioavailable copper out there. Take a look at my top 3 copper-rich foods post. Struggled a lot with moderate hyperemesis gravidarum for the first 20 weeks of my pregnancy and worried a lot about getting enough nutrition. I had been following a pro-metabolic diet for years prior. Would supplementing be warranted then? I could barely eat anything and was throwing up 5 to 7 times a day. It's really up to you. You know what you were getting in and you know what you weren't. And if that means supplementation is the only way that you're gonna be able to actually eat something, then maybe in that case you do consider it. Whether that's desiccated beef liver, even desiccated oysters, although I'm doing research on that. But I would probably opt for whole foods as much as I could. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for you in your situation. Do you know any baby formula that doesn't have all those terrible vegetable oil, palm oils in them? I personally don't, but I know that there are some recipes out there for baby formula that you can make yourself. So, if this is something that you wanted to do, because I know that you personally mentioned that you were kind of in the trying to conceive phase, not necessarily I've had a baby and I need help with that. You could potentially make a bunch and freeze it. So that's just an option. Nourishing Traditions has a pretty good recipe, but they do advise that you add cod liver oil. That's just something that you would have to make a decision on. I have low ferritin and my periods are insane gallons of blood. You post about your period as a way of getting rid of too much iron. Could it be why my periods are so bad? Am I connecting the two correctly? So heavy periods usually have to do with excess estrogen, and estrogen increases our absorption of iron as well. So if we have heavy clotty periods, that's definitely an estrogen issue. It could also be your body trying to get rid of excess iron. The fact that you have low ferritin could also mean that you have excess iron. But remember, ferritin isn't really, it's an irrelevant marker. So depending on what low means for you, it could mean nothing. But generally speaking, if your iron levels, I'd be more curious about your, but remember, ferritin isn't really, it's an irrelevant marker. So depending on what low means for you, it could mean nothing. But generally speaking, if your iron levels, I'd be more curious about your hemoglobin levels. And if those are low, then you definitely have excess iron. So those are kind of things that you should be thinking about. I'd probably focus on detoxing estrogen. And so how you do that is keeping your liver full of sugar. They're far, far, far lower than any kind of estrogenic hormonal levels in plant foods and plant milks, like soy milk and things like that. So it's really not a concern for me. And especially if I'm buying high quality dairy, so non-pasteurized, non-fortified, that kind of stuff, cows not treated with RBHG or something like that. The last iron test I did, the normal, probably crappy one, my ferritin was extremely low, 0.8, and testosterone was extremely high, around 12. Magnesium seemed to be good. Any idea if I could get better without donating blood ASAP? So I don't see what the problem is here. If you're trying to get your ferritin up, remember ferritin is a really just irrelevant marker, so I'm not sure what the problem is, especially if your testosterone is high. This question did come from a male, so that's why I'm saying it sounds like it's fine. Magnesium seems to be good. Blood is not a good marker for electrolytes like magnesium, but that's all really I have to say on the question because I need more information. Does taking zinc chelate copper? Yes, it does. So zinc and copper are kind of partners. They have a seesaw relationship, so if you take zinc, you're completely just not allowing copper to take up any receptors in your body. So it's gonna throw things off. I personally don't take zinc for that reason. What's your stance on nutritional response testing or muscle testing? So this is actually something that I'm trained in, but it depends on the practitioner and it depends on the situation, because if you don't get the person you're testing out of a fight or flight kind of phase or mode, you're not going to be able to test at all. It's going to be very inaccurate. It's not going to make any sense. Or you might not realize that it doesn't make any sense until they're gone. So that said, I don't use it too much in my practice, just because I think there are better markers, in my opinion, of seeing how the body's responding to certain things. But it can be. I've definitely heard of success stories and things like that. So I think it really depends on what kind of treatment or things. But it can be. I've definitely heard of success stories and things like that. So I think it really depends on what kind of treatment, or I shouldn't say treatment, what kind of approach you're looking for, what really resonates with you as far as like your practitioner's approach and what you're looking for, what you like to do, because it really depends on you as well, and what you like and what you want and what resonates with you and drives with what you're, the vibration of your body. So that's kind of what I think on that. It's a valuable tool for some people, but for others, not so much. Thoughts on pork? We raise our own pigs and feed them non-GMO grains. I think that's amazing. If you know exactly where your pork is coming from, that's like the hardest part about getting good pork. If you know what kind of grains you're feeding them, if you know what other kind of food you're feeding them, then I think that's no problem. Just remember they do have more monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats depending on what you feed them. So if you're looking to get more stable fats and PUFA overload or lipid peroxidation is something that you're worried about, then maybe incorporate pork a couple times a week, but focus on the more ruminant animals. Again, it's great that you actually have access to this. I think that's amazing. Does not having a period through pregnancy and breastfeeding contribute to iron overload? I personally wouldn't worry about it. What do you think about Dr. Sears' primetime diet? Well, if you've been following me for a little while, you know that I don't like diets because it takes the person completely out of context. So, it's a typical weight loss diet, how conventional nutrition we use, what healthy foods are, eat more vegetables, eat more grains, eat more fruits, more lean meats, more seafood, less, sugary things, less meat, for example. So I'm personally not a fan. I don't think it's, it's not supportive to the metabolism, and it's restrictive, and that's not anything that I like to be part of. I have dry skin. What should I be using as a moisturizer? And more importantly, what can I do to better hydrate my skin? So our skin is a kind of a reflection of what's going on inside. If you have dry skin, you're probably dehydrated internally as well. So I'd be looking to what water you're drinking. Are you getting enough minerals and electrolytes throughout the day? Because if you're just drinking straight water without any minerals in it, you're dehydrating yourself. And if you're forcing yourself to drink a gallon of water per day, some people recommend, you're definitely dehydrating yourself. So I would focus on adding more minerals to my diet, like salt, like making sure I'm getting enough potassium, magnesium, eating foods with water in them. It's like the end of melon season, but melons are full of water too, fruits are full of water. So upping those and just drinking when I'm thirsty, and then going from there. Almost forgot, fat-soluble vitamins are really important for hydration too. So especially like things like vitamin A, retinol, not beta-carotene, but real vitamin A from animal fat. So making sure you're getting enough of that through dairy, through beef liver, and things like that. As far as what you should hydrate your skin with or what you should moisturize with, that's really dependent on the person, but I personally go for low PUFA moisturization. I would check out Cosmo Beauty. I also have gotten a tip from my friend Jessica Ash Wellness on using tallow for moisturizer. That's really cool, and it's been working really great for me. As well as coconut oil. That's a saturated fat. It's not going to oxidize, and it's going to moisturize really well. So those are the couple things that I would probably try out. What water do you find safe, healthy? I currently drink reverse osmosis water. Try to avoid tap. I also drink alkaline water. So alkaline water is a complete waste of money. We don't need to be worrying about that. Our body can regulate its alkalinity by itself, and drinking anything that's going to make our stomach more alkaline is going to mess with our stomach acid production in general. And then reverse osmosis water, so unless you're adding minerals to it, it's going to dehydrate you. And I've seen like really, really bad reactions of people that didn't know this, and they just were drinking straight up reverse osmosis water, not replenishing minerals, and they ended up with a bunch of like health problems, really, really crepey skin, all this weird stuff that happens. So I personally use a Berkey. It's not the most amazing thing in the world, but it's way better than a lot of things out there. It, you know, filters heavy metals, it filters pharmaceuticals, it filters pathogens, bacteria, things like that. And I choose to add concentrated minerals to it, so I'm adding minerals back to the water. You know, I am on the hunt for a home system. That would be pretty cool, but I haven't found the one that I like the best. There's not all water filtration systems are perfect. There's something wrong with each one. This is what I found that works the best for me, and Berkey's the best so far that I've found that works for me. But definitely open to continuing to upgrade my water situation. I would just recommend, if you are using reverse osmosis, that you're making sure to add minerals back. Can creatine supplementation cause higher homocysteine? I've actually seen the opposite in my research. So, you know, creatine is something that I wouldn't supplement with unless I had the foundations down, like good sleep, good food, good food frequency, the right foods for me to support my energy levels and needs, sunlight as well. But you know, if you have all those down, if you're doing it right, if you feel good, your body temperature and pulse are good, then maybe supplementing with creatine could enhance this. But just throwing it on top of a garbage fire is not going to help. I've been taking magnesium bicarbonate and put 4 ounces in a big water container. I just realized when I nurse, I drink the solution, and was reading they recommend sipping on it instead of drinking it all at once. Wondering if what would be best to drink, juice, milk, or plain water, so I don't dilute my electrolytes. I've been having issues with my sleep. So there's a lot going on in that question. Sleep issues could be related to anything, especially if you're breastfeeding. Like, are you keeping the room? Like, what are your breastfeeding practices? When you wake up at night, are you keeping the room pretty dimly lit, not looking at your phone while you're doing it? What are your other electrolytes like? Do you have enough sodium and potassium? Because if you don't, putting magnesium is kind of like putting gasoline on a fire. It can make things worse. It increases enzymatic reactions, so it can have a really detoxifying effect. And if we aren't used to that, and if we suddenly woken up all of these enzymes, we're gonna feel it. And if we don't have the foundation to support that huge, boost in enzymatic reactions, it can cause more problems. It can make us feel crappy. So I would make sure you're getting plenty of the other electrolytes, making sure you're drinking, like you said, actually, milk has a lot of electrolytes in it already. That's a great option. That's a really good idea. Juice as well. Those are really good ideas. Maybe just some juice with salt, coconut water with salt, orange juice as well, maybe some adrenal cocktails. Plain water will dehydrate you unless it has minerals in it. So make sure you're drinking when thirsty as well. Those are all things to think about. But yeah, I think you are on the right track. Sleep is usually a symptom of some bigger imbalance. So see how that helps, but it could take some further investigation. Could iron overload cause a normally regular menstrual cycle to be very short and light? Yes, you mentioned that you just started supplementing with a prenatal that has a pretty high amount of iron. Iron turns on our immune system. It turns on the inflammatory part of our immune system, so it kind of perceives danger. And when our body is stressed, and danger equals stress on the body, and if our body is stressed, it will slow down reproductive actions. So I would keep an eye on this. I think you mentioned you also stopped your prenatal. So I would see what the next couple periods look like. If it persists, then you probably want to do some further investigation, but hopefully it comes back and regulates as well. What does pain in ovulation indicate? So this is called Mittelschmerz, and it's a German word for middle pain. Basically, you feel the egg being released from your ovary. It's not necessarily a super bad thing, although we should not really feel our ovulation happening. It should be kind of smooth. It could mean that you need more support throughout your cycle when this is happening, because maybe you don't have enough electrolytes or protein, carbs, and fat to support and that's kind of why you're feeling the extra stress and the cramping. But you know, it's nothing to be super alarmed about as long as your period's length and consistency and that cycle aspect is the same. If that starts to change, then you would be kind of worried. Do you prefer Great Lakes collagen or Vital Proteins? I prefer Great Lakes because Vital Proteins just got bought by Nestle, and I don't trust big corporations like that. So I'm gonna be Great Lakes all the way now. If iron overload is an issue, how can eating meat or beef be okay? P.S. I love beef, not a hater, haha. So yes, beef and meat in general does have iron, but that doesn't mean we should discount the other great things about it. So it has a lot of, meats have a lot of other great minerals and nutrients and fat-soluble vitamins that we really need and we can't get from other places. Also, they're a great form of bioavailable protein. And so if we're not getting these, the body is under stress, and stress is what also contributes to iron overload. So, you know, just because something contains iron doesn't mean we shouldn't be eating it. It's kind of just like trying to avoid PUFAs or polyunsaturated fats. You literally can't. They're in eggs, they are in animal foods, just in smaller amounts. And so just because there's, you know, a big con to something doesn't mean we should necessarily scratch it out. Meat definitely has a huge benefit to our overall health. And because we're consuming iron with the other factors that help it as well, it's other partners, because minerals don't live in isolation, they don't work in isolation. It's more beneficial for us that way. What supplements do you recommend during the first trimester? Food aversions. So I don't recommend supplements. You guys probably know this already, but if I did have to take a supplement, it'd probably be desiccated beef liver. I would focus on adrenal cocktail. Is teeth whitening safe? Probably not, honestly, just knowing what modern dentistry does. I think they use some kind of bleaching agent, so that in your mouth, you know, you absorb that. Your gums are one of the fastest way to enter your bloodstream, so I personally don't think it's safe, but you know, I would probably pursue a biological dentist if I did really want my teeth whitened. Best ways to prepare the body pre-post blood donation to mitigate stress. This is really going to depend on the person and their state of health, what's going on. So usually working on a really good food strategy, figuring out when they should be eating, what they should be eating. Having a really good food and lifestyle strategy, having built a foundation for a couple months on which they can then donate blood, making sure eating mineral-rich foods, vitamin-rich foods, and in general, once the foundation is there, then they can donate blood. And I personally like to have a meal before my blood donation as well as after. I think we burn something like 600 calories when we donate blood. We really don't want to go to a blood donation depleted because we're going to definitely leave a blood donation depleted, and just making sure you're upping minerals, all of your electrolytes a couple days before your blood donation and a couple days after. Overcome lactose intolerance. So this is a multi-pronged issue. It usually stems from a very, very irritated small intestine. So cutting out those gut irritating foods is going to be essential. So grains, seeds, nuts, legumes, beans, which are legumes, but very, very harsh cruciferous vegetables, too much raw vegetables, those things. Really focusing on gut healing foods, really easy to digest foods. I love tropical fruit, I love gelatin, collagen. So those are the things that I'd probably focus on. You also need really good thyroid function. So if your metabolism is in the crapper, then you know your lactose intolerance could be a very big sign that of poor thyroid function. So making sure your metabolism is up, making sure you're working on it, eating at a frequency that makes sense for you, eating balanced meals, making the body feel safe, and then you need progesterone as well. So if you're female, especially if you're female, you need to make sure you're cycling and you're making enough progesterone. I would just make sure it's a food source and not synthetic, as well as, even if it is a food source, just not from soybean oil. So I think Uniki is pretty good, Life Extension's pretty good. I have some links on my website. I think Swanson has some options, as well as Idea Labs Tocovit, which is also pretty good. So those are a couple options. Just look for a whole food source that's non-soybean. What are some ways to support kidney function? 1, hydrate well, and by hydrate I mean work on your minerals, get them up, because that's what hydrates you. Avoid iron supplementation. That can really kind of melt. How to increase glutathione? Well, just take a supplement, even a liposomal supplement. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You need copper to create glutathione, so getting those levels up, constantly working on that, that's the way to go. I can only get sunflower oil packed oysters. Still worth eating? Yes, absolutely. Just rinse them off. I'm trying to conceive, 2 ounces of raw beef liver every day. Is that okay if when pregnant? I personally think so, as long as you have frozen the raw beef liver to kill any potential parasites. You do this for about 2 or 3 weeks. Otherwise, like, I would cook it up in my ground beef or ground meat, bison, whatever, and you know, you could have your desiccated beef liver pills as well. So those are a couple options, but it's great. Why are oysters healthy if they have lead and cadmium? This is a really good question. So oysters provide like an irreplaceable nutrient-dense packed punch that you really can't replace it. The levels of lead and cadmium are so minor compared to the huge pro and the immense benefit that they provide for the human body that it's not even a worry to me. So there you go. When is the best time to hydrate? Avoid drinking water while eating, right? Yeah, drink when thirsty, and don't drink too much water with food, especially if it's got stuff in it. You want to stick to 4 ounces to 8 ounces, no more during a meal. What do you suggest as an adrenal cocktail? I have a recipe for this in a post of mine. Just look for the post with, it's a picture of a glass of orange juice, or is it just orange juice? So check it out, the recipe's there. How can one have an overload of copper in the liver? Do you mean iron? Because that's really what accumulates in the liver. This is due to supplementation, this is due to stress, this is due to basically, like, you know, poor farming practices and fortification. Some people that do have like high copper on their HCMAs, this is unusable copper, so it means that copper is missing its cofactors like vitamin A, vitamin C, and magnesium to be utilized. Absorption issues, lost 50% of colon, arthritis, Crohn's, and now bleeding, abscesses, lower colon. Oh gosh, I am so sorry to hear this. This is really tough. Not only is there a lot of problems going on, but the person has experienced a lot of trauma to their colon as well. So I'd probably be focusing on supporting the digestive system with some kind of digestive enzyme or hydrochloric acid in some way, because I know that they're compromised. But at the same time, I would also be trying to figure out, okay, what in their lifestyle, what are they eating, what caused this all to happen, so that we can work on chipping away at that problem, because otherwise we're going to end up with worse and worse and worse problems. So if this is you that you're asking the question for, I'd be wondering, what are you eating every day? How are you living your life? What job are you in? How are your relationships? Are you eating frequently enough? What are your energy demands? And go from there. Is sugar the problem when you have candida? So I just want to make sure that people understand that candida is something that naturally occurs in our body. It's just when it becomes out of control, it overgrows, that it becomes a really big problem. So what causes candida to overgrow in the first place? That's stress. So a very slow metabolism will allow things to proliferate where they shouldn't be. Excess estrogen will also cause this. Can cause this and feed candida, as well as iron. So iron feeds pathogens. That's a huge component of candida. If we're taking iron supplements or things with iron, we're constantly feeding candida, and it's going to proliferate. How much carb, protein, and fat needed a day for a female in late 30s? This is going to really vary. I know that it's probably not the answer you want to hear, but it's going to vary from person to person. Their situation is different. Their metabolism is different. What works for them, it's going to be very different from woman to woman. So, depending on the state of their health, they may need more, they may need less, they may need more carbs, they may need more fat, they may need more protein. So it really depends, and this is what I work to figure out with people. This is usually an inside-out problem. If our body's not able to heal scars properly, the color is very, very noticeable. I would usually look at vitamin A and copper intake, because those are really essential. What is an ideal magnesium consumption range per day? If our metabolism is low, if we don't have a good metabolic function, if we're severely depleted, then it's about 5 times our body weight in milligrams per day. So if I were 200 pounds, it'd be 1,000. Castor oil packs good for liver detox. Yes, these can be really amazing, but it really depends on the health and the state of the person. They're not exactly the first thing I would recommend going after. If we have really, really poor detoxification issues, then if we're not eliminating every day, then it can create a lot of problems versus being helpful. So it really depends on you as a person where your health is at. But if your health is pretty good, then yeah, it can help with additional detox. I got to your piercing question, but what toothpaste do I recommend? I use Dr. Bronner's, and they're a pretty good brand, fluoride-free. Cause of cystic chin acne a week before period starts. So right before our period, our estrogen starts to rise. That's what triggers our period to come. So if our estrogen is too high, it can also sometimes cause us to have cystic acne. Headaches, migraine before period with Hashimoto's, any connection, help. Yeah, so just like I mentioned, right before our period, our estrogen starts to rise. So if basically it's kind of telling us that we're not nourishing ourselves properly, and perhaps our detoxification systems aren't properly running as well. We need to be able to detoxify estrogen. Otherwise, it recirculates and builds up in excess in the body. So this can be also a problem and cause migraines. I believe estrogen can constrict our veins and cardiovascular system, so it can give us migraines. So can lack of salt or other minerals. So we really have to be nourishing ourselves, especially leading up to our period, because period is also depleted. Normal to spot 2 to 3 days before and after period. Use cup 26-day cycles, 6-day period, 34 years old. This could point to a progesterone deficiency. Some spotting is normal, but a couple days is kind of strange. So that usually points to a progesterone deficiency prior. Afterwards, maybe you're just spotting because your period's super light. So I'd need to know more information. If this has changed recently for you, then I would continue to keep an eye on it. More inexpensive ones are going to be pitchers instead of like actual filters. So I'd probably say something like a chlorine and fluoride filter. AquaGear has a pretty decent one. Are beans estrogenic? Yes, they are. I eat copper-rich fruits, but I have issues that seem copper-related. Should I eat liver? That could point to you need additional support. Fruits sometimes aren't going to cut it for people. So I'd probably focus on getting even more copper-rich foods in my diet. Electrolyte imbalance. How to test for this? So I'd get a hair tissue mineral analysis and HTMA. I offer this, so if you're interested, hit me up.